And you were lucky with the reshoots that Kevin hadn't cut his hair.
We were lucky that he hadn't cut his hair, and we actually did some reshooting for the beginning of the film as well. That the studio really liked the film as it was, but they thought it would be so nice to know where these creatures come from. So they wanted to have an earthquake happen at the beginning of the film, and that would unleash the graboids onto the upper plates of the earth, and so in this sequence we shot with an earthquake happening in Nevada. A coyote gets eaten in off camera, but we know that the coyote is eaten. And when we previewed that version of the film, the audience really did not like the film because they felt we were being mean to animals. So they really responded negatively. It was an interesting study in how putting something early in the film, like a coyote crying, being devoured by a graboid, changed their perception through the film about the animals being hurt and that sort of thing. So fortunately, that preview allowed us to take that out. And it's still a mystery where they came from.
What appealed to you about Tremors when you first looked at the script?
Well, I was involved from the very outset of the idea with Steve. So Brent and Steve really nailed the characters, and they just came alive off the page, and the tone, which was unusual, as you said. The tone there aren't many films that combine horror and comedy, and to have scares and laughs and go back and forth between them. And I really loved that. I loved the fact that the script had all of that very evident. All I had to do was pull off the script.
Is it true that the sound effect for the roar of the graboids was made by flushing a toilet?
It was, yes, Steve Flick was the sound designer on the film, someone else we had gone to USC Film School with. And he used lots of different sounds for getting the effects of the graboids, and one of them was a flushing toilet. It's incredible how different sounds used in different ways and in combination with one another can give you such a different kind of sound and a very scary feeling with something that normally you wouldn't think of as scary.
So when you were making the film, I assume you had plenty of time to get all the shots that you needed.
That was my assumption, that I would have plenty of time to do the film. I was finally in feature films. I'd been doing short films. I'd done over 100 short films by that time, so I wasn't new to filmmaking, but I thought that being on a feature, I would have plenty of time to do all the work that I wanted to do. And I was kind of stunned and and taken aback by the fact that it was just as hard to get through the days as it was on my no-budget films. There was we were always pressed against the wall, and and I've found that that's generally the way filmmaking is.
And something that Nancy touched upon, she said it was just especially some of the effect scenes, it was really nail-biting. A, are the graboids going to work? B, is the light going to be okay? C, is it actually even going to scan on screen and be scary? What was that like? That level of pressure.
Yeah, it was very. It was a little scary to be feeling responsible to make this happen and make it work. And sometimes I was just so disappointed in the way the physical effects would not quite work, just because we were trying to do things that are physically impossible. So in the physical world, it's impossible to move a 30-foot creature to the ground. But we were trying to make that feel that it was possible. And so I was hard on myself for that. And Gail Ann Hurd actually was very helpful to me in that one night when I was discouraged. She said, this is the way it always is on films. Don't feel bad. The effects are always difficult to pull off. And so that did give me some encouragement that maybe we could make something work out of that. We had the final night. We were shooting a scene with Megan and Jim's car sinking in the night as the graboids dug out from under the car, and we had planned this way of making the car sink into a pool of water covered with vermiculite that is like a sand-like looking material. But it became evident through the night that the vermiculite had absorbed the water so much that it was a solid surface. So it wouldn't allow the car to sink. And so we had to scramble to get ideas of how are we going to, we put the camera down low, really low to the ground so that we wouldn't see much. And then we built up a berm in front of the camera to try to hide what was not working. And it was one of those things. I mean, it was the last night of the shoot, so there was no more. We couldn't come back the next day and do more. It was whatever we got that night was going to be it. And in the script, we had the car sinks, and as it's sinking, Megan crashes through the windshield and climbs up on the hood of the car and is almost like a hood ornament going down with the ship. And that was a beautiful image that we couldn't do because the whole effect wasn't working quite right. So we never got to that part of the scene. We had her disappear in the car as the car goes down, and we used the headlights as an effect to get around the fact that we just could not get the car to sink.
Do you think you had to be, in a pre-CGI world, you had to be more creative and inventive back then than you do now?
Well, there are things you can do a lot easier now with CGI, I use CGI a lot, so it's very helpful. But I still feel that physical effects and physical things that are really happening are a great way to tell stories. And even when you're doing CGI, it's nice to mix it up so that it doesn't look like the audience can't figure out exactly what the technique is you're using, because you just want it to feel real. You don't want to have your magic tricks seen through. So, and in those days, without CG, we still were using lots of different techniques to try to change it up between miniatures and full scale and different different techniques, hand puppets. We used, I mean, the simplest thing we had was for the graboid tentacles to be just hand puppets, which worked great. I mean, we had every type of technique used, and puppeteering with lots of very complex puppeteering of the graboid tentacles, but also just a hand puppet. So we tried to break it up a lot so that people couldn't quite tell what was going on.
And like the other effect shots with the slime, which I think was pumpkins, innards.
Right. It was gross.
Was that all done in one take as well?
We did several takes, but we did everything real, and so when the characters are hit by graboid slime, they're really being hit by the most disgusting, slimy stuff you can imagine being hit by, and we just had buckets up high on cranes, and we were tossing it out on the actors.
What scenes are you most proud of from the film?
I really like the character interaction when they're discussing where these things came from in Chang's market. I like the scenes where they're trying to just figure out what's going on and coming together as a community. As I said, the film to me works because it's about people really coming together to fight off an evil. And so those scenes where the community is working together, and even when they have their disputes later in the film when Bert and Val have their argument. I mean, that too feels like a very real kind of argument. The way Bert he was ready for this from the beginning, and he just felt sort of betrayed by the way they were running off, trying to escape. I really liked the character interactions.
When the movie came out, it's fair to say that it was a little bit disappointing at the box office. Why are we still here 30 years later talking about it?
Well, it was a disappointment when the film came out, and the studio really wanted the film to have made $5 million that first weekend, and it made $3 million or something, I can't remember. But it was a disappointment. But we still were proud of the film. We liked the film. We wanted it to do better. But underway at that time was the home video market that was really just gathering steam. And fortunately, when the film was released on home entertainment, it really took off and just had a huge audience, surprised Universal and I think everybody, surprised us all, and it was great. And so that led to continued interest to make more of the films and continue exploring it.
And why do you think, there's two generations that are still enjoying the film now? Why do you think that is?
I think the film goes to some very basic fears we have of being surprised by something out of our control, and it is about a community coming together and fighting off the evils that surround us, and so I think it goes to something pretty primal, and it can you can relate to it whether you're young or old.
We had a chat with Chris Defaria about it because he produced the second movie. His theory is because it's like the perfect family film in that it's scary, but it's not too scary. It's a adventure and it's a comedy and a bit of horror. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I think the film is, it has its scares, but it's a little more human overall. And part of the reason I think it didn't do as well when it came out was the horror films at that time were very dark, very scary. And this film was lighter because it had people that you cared about who had a lightness to them and a sense of humor despite the awful situation they were in. And I think that appealed to people, not the core horror audience at that time, but over time, it's found an audience that where you could enjoy the film with your children, parents, and kids. And I've been approached by so many people who said, my dad and I always used to watch that movie every year, and it meant so much to us. And it's kind of nice to know that it was a film that parents and kids could watch together.
And you mentioned the fans of the film, and they're quite, ardent. What do the fans ask you about Tremors? Do they ask you for obscure details and things like that? Or?
They ask practical questions about how did you get the graboids to move around underground, and there were some interesting techniques we used that worked really well for giving that illusion. But they also wonder about how everybody got along on the set, because everybody seems to be getting along so well. And it's true that I think the camaraderie of that film was partly because we were like a family making that film together. And so it was, everybody was pulling together to try to make something special out of it.
And you were all stuck there in the middle of nowhere.
Right. There was nowhere to go. So everybody went to dailies every night and watched the film, the cast and crew, everybody. And we just would sit and watch yesterday's work and talk about it and plan on the next day.
Can you give me a sentence that sums up your experience or your memories or your connection with Tremors?
Wow, a sentence. That's going to be tough.
A couple of sentences. Maybe what Tremors means to you.
Tremors will always be dear to my heart because I love the people who are in the movie and who the movie's about, and I love the people that I made the movie with, the actors and the crew, and it was my first movie, and I will never, ever forget a moment of that.
Let's see. So what did you see in Michael Gross that made you bring him in for an audition? Obviously, he was on Family Ties.
He was on Family Ties, which was shooting right up until we started shooting. And I thought, gee, I can't see this guy being Burt Gummer from Family Ties. But he had done this television movie about the FBI. I think it was the FBI Murders it was called. And his character was very different in that. So I thought, oh, well, he has a lot of range, definitely. And then he came in to audition. And he was just incredible. He made me believe the graboids were under the floor in my office because he jumped up around and jumped up I can't remember if we were in my office or where it was, but I just remember him using the furniture and jumping around and really making me believe that down below. I'll try that again. Hello. Sorry. Michael came in to read for the role, and he made me believe that there were graboids under my office floor. And it was really astonishing how much I believed, and just from his audition. So I could see that he could really pull off the part. And it was something that really influenced me in the making of the film as well, that I saw from that audition how the best special effect for making these creatures feel real was the actors' reactions. He really made me believe in those creatures in that audition.
And did he really jump on the table? Because that's something that we
That's-
asked him about, and he doesn't.
He doesn't remember. I have this memory of it. So I think he did. But whatever he was doing, he was jumping around, and he made me believe.
So everyone that we've talked to so far says that Michael Gross is very studious and intense when he's on set and getting ready for a scene, but otherwise he's one of the nicest guys in the world. Do you know this to be true, and what was your experience with him on set?
Michael is a great actor who really comes with a lot of ideas. He comes with great preparation and is very into the mechanics of the whole making as well, so that he wants to, figure out how to use the props and what he's going to do when with what prop, and so it's very meticulous in the way he works, which is great. And it's true, he's a great guy and very just fun to be with. I was a neighbor of his for many years, so I knew him as in our off life as well.
And then do you have 3 words to describe Burt Gummer, and then 3 words to describe Michael Gross?
Burt Gummer, prepared, has great perseverance, and is scary. And Michael Gross is charming, smart, and a wonderful man.